What if I told you that Croatia released 100 massive birds with 2.8-meter wingspans onto remote Adriatic islands where they'd been extinct for decades? It sounds impossible, right? Well, Croatia actually did this. And the result, after 25 years, amazed the entire conservation community. This is that incredible story. Picture Croatia's Adriatic coast, a stunning archipelago of 78 major islands and over 1,000 smaller ones scattered across brilliant blue waters. Today, these islands are famous worldwide for pristine beaches and crystal-clear seas. But if we traveled back to 1997, we'd witness something disturbing. The skies above these islands were empty, not just quiet, ecologically dead. The Griffon vulture, one of nature's most magnificent birds, had completely vanished. These weren't ordinary birds. With wingspans reaching 2.8 meters and weighing up to 11 kilograms, Griffon vultures are among Europe's largest flying birds. They soar on thermal currents at altitudes exceeding 3,000 meters, scanning vast territories with eyesight 8 times sharper than humans. For over 50,000 years, these incredible creatures performed a critical ecological role across the Mediterranean. But by the 1960s, something catastrophic happened. Across Croatia, Greece, Italy, and Spain, Griffon vulture populations crashed by over 95%. On Croatia's islands, the last breeding pairs disappeared in 1968. The Adriatic skies fell silent. Why? Human persecution tells only part of the story. For centuries, shepherds and farmers viewed vultures as livestock threats, shooting them on sight despite vultures feeding exclusively on carrion, already dead animals. Poisoned bait intended for wolves and jackals killed thousands of vultures. But the real devastation came from habitat destruction and agricultural changes. As traditional free-range livestock farming declined across the Mediterranean, dead animals became scarce. Without reliable food sources, vulture populations couldn't sustain themselves. The numbers were staggering. In 1900, Croatia hosted an estimated 300 breeding pairs of Griffon vultures. By 1970, 0 remained. The ecological consequences rippled across the islands. Without vultures to consume carcasses quickly and efficiently, disease spread among remaining wildlife. Decomposing animals contaminated water sources. The island's delicate ecological balance collapsed. Scientists recognized the crisis. Dr. Goran Šefarek, a pioneering Croatian ornithologist, spent years documenting the ecological void left by vanished vultures. His research revealed shocking facts. Each Griffon vulture consumes approximately 1 kilogram of carrion daily. A colony of 100 vultures cleans up 36,500 kilograms of dead animal matter annually, preventing disease transmission and completing nature's recycling system. Without them, entire ecosystems suffered. But restoring a locally extinct species presented unprecedented challenges. Critics were ruthless. You can't bring back birds that have been gone for 30 years, environmentalists argued. The habitat has changed too much. Economists called it wasteful spending during Croatia's post-war reconstruction. We need infrastructure, not birds, politicians complained. Farmers remained hostile, remembering generations of conflict with large raptors. Yet Dr. Šefarek and his team at the Croatian Natural History Museum refused to abandon hope. They studied successful vulture reintroductions in France and Spain, identifying what worked and what failed. They discovered something crucial. Griffon vultures possess remarkable site fidelity, returning to ancestral nesting cliffs even after decades of absence. If the birds could be re-established, they would stay. In 1997, after securing funding from international conservation organizations, Croatia launched the Adriatic Griffon Vulture Reintroduction Project. The plan was both ambitious and controversial. The team would source 100 Griffon vultures from stable populations in Spain, transport them 2,000 kilometers to Croatia, and release them on the remote island of Cres in the northern Adriatic. On paper, it seemed straightforward. In reality, it was an engineering and biological nightmare. Transporting 100 large raptors across Europe required meticulous planning. Each vulture needed individual transport crates designed to minimize stress during the 30-hour journey. Spanish conservation authorities carefully selected young birds between 6 months and 2 years old enough to survive independently, but young enough to imprint on new territory. The birds underwent health screenings, blood tests, and veterinary examinations before departure. The logistics were staggering. The operation required coordination among Croatian, Spanish, and international conservation organizations, customs authorities, and specialized wildlife transport companies. Each bird was fitted with identifying leg bands and several with satellite tracking tags to monitor movements. The total cost exceeded $250,000, enormous for 1990s Croatia. Critics called it extravagant. $250,000 for birds, newspaper headlines screamed. But the team pushed forward. In spring 1997, the first group of 38 Griffon vultures arrived on Cres. The island offered ideal conditions: towering limestone cliffs for nesting, abundant thermal air currents for soaring, and critically, a guaranteed food supply. The Croatian team established supplementary feeding stations where they placed fresh carcasses from local farms, dead sheep, goats, and cattle that would otherwise be disposed of. Initial results were mixed. Of the first 38 birds, 8 died within 6 months from various causes, including collisions with power lines, starvation during adaptation, and 1 poisoning incident. Conservation teams worked frantically to address each mortality cause. They marked power lines with visual deterrents, increased feeding station food supplies, and launched education campaigns among local residents about poison dangers. By 1998, despite setbacks, something remarkable occurred. 2 pairs of the released vultures began exhibiting breeding behavior. They selected cliff ledges, performed courtship displays, and built nests from sticks and grass. The conservation team hardly dared hope. Griffon vultures mature slowly, typically not breeding until age 4 or 5. These birds were younger. Would they succeed? In spring 1999, history was made. 2 eggs hatched on Cres, the first wild Griffon vulture chicks born in Croatia in 31 years. The discovery sent shockwaves through the conservation community. "We couldn't believe it," Dr. Shafarek later recalled. "We'd hoped for breeding within 5 years. It happened in 2. The chicks, carefully monitored from observation posts, fledged successfully after 120 days of parental care. Encouraged by this success, the team accelerated releases. Between 1998 and 2004, an additional 62 Griffon vultures were released across Cres, the neighboring island of Krk, and several smaller islets. Each release was refined based on lessons learned. The team improved acclimation procedures, enhanced feeding stations, and coordinated with local communities to reduce human-related threats. The project faced constant challenges. In 2001, a severe drought reduced livestock mortality, decreasing natural food availability. The team responded by doubling feeding station supplies, working with farmers to coordinate donations of livestock carcasses. In 2003, power line collisions spiked. Engineers retrofitted 47 kilometers of dangerous lines with bird-safe technology, but the vultures adapted spectacularly. By 2005, the Cres colony numbered 78 birds with 12 active breeding pairs. Satellite tracking revealed incredible findings. The vultures were flying daily foraging routes covering up to 150 kilometers, crossing to mainland Croatia and even neighboring Slovenia. Their remarkable eyesight and aerial expertise made them phenomenally efficient scavengers. One tracked individual consumed carcasses at 47 different locations across a 3-month period. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 2007, a pair of released vultures abandoned Cres and established a new nesting site on Prvić, an uninhabited island 80 kilometers south. They hadn't been released there, they chose it naturally. This spontaneous colonization proved the project's ultimate success. The vultures weren't just surviving, they were reclaiming ancestral territories independently. By 2010, Croatia's Griffon vulture population reached 150 birds with 28 breeding pairs spread across 7 islands. The numbers climbed annually: 180 birds in 2012, 220 in 2015. 280 in 2018. Each year brought new milestones. In 2014, vultures nested on Plavnik Island for the first time in recorded history. In 2017, a pair established residence on Bisevo, Croatia's southernmost major island, expanding the range by 200 kilometers. The ecological transformation was profound. Islands with active vulture colonies showed measurably improved ecosystem health. Carcass decomposition time decreased by 78%, reducing disease vectors and water contamination. Wild boar populations stabilized as vulture presence affected scavenger competition dynamics. Even plant communities benefited as nutrient cycling improved through rapid carrion processing. Scientists documented cascading ecological effects. Griffon vultures don't just consume carcasses. They pulverize bones with incredibly powerful digestive acids, recycling calcium and phosphorus back into island soils. This nutrient enrichment supported healthier vegetation, which sustained larger insect populations, which fed diverse bird species. The vulture's return catalyzed ecosystem-wide recovery. The economic impact surprised everyone. Initially, tourism operators worried that large scavenging birds would deter visitors. The opposite happened. Griffon vulture watching became a major ecotourism attraction. Specialized tour companies now offer vulture observation expeditions to Cres, generating over $2 million annually for local economies. Restaurants and hotels market themselves as vulture territory, capitalizing on conservation success. By 2022, Croatia's Griffon vulture population exceeded 400 birds, with 87 confirmed breeding pairs, the highest numbers in over a century. What began with 100 released birds grew through natural reproduction into a self-sustaining population, requiring minimal human intervention. The project succeeded beyond the wildest projections. But success brought new challenges. As vulture numbers increased, so did potential conflicts with human activities. Powerline collisions remained a persistent threat despite mitigation efforts. Several birds died from lead poisoning after consuming carcasses of animals shot with lead ammunition, prompting Croatia to mandate non-toxic ammunition for hunting near vulture territories. The conservation team adapted constantly. They expanded feeding station networks to 14 locations across the islands, ensuring reliable food supplies during lean periods. They collaborated with farmers, purchasing livestock carcasses that might otherwise be disposed of wastefully. This created a novel economic partnership. Farmers received payment for dead animals while supporting conservation. Technology played an increasing role. Advanced GPS satellite tags now track 50 individual vultures continuously, providing unprecedented data on movement patterns, foraging behavior, and habitat use. Researchers discovered that Croatian vultures regularly travel to Italy, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and even Hungary, often covering 500 kilometers in single foraging trips. These birds operate across international boundaries, making conservation inherently transnational. The genetic success was equally remarkable. DNA analysis revealed that Croatia's population maintains healthy genetic diversity despite founding from just 100 individuals. Occasional exchange with Italian and Spanish vulture populations through natural dispersal prevents inbreeding. Several Croatian-born vultures have been documented breeding in Italian colonies, and vice versa, creating a connected Mediterranean metapopulation. The project transformed scientific understanding of raptor reintroduction. Conventional wisdom held that released birds rarely establish wild populations without continuous supplementation. Croatia proved otherwise. After 2004, no additional birds were released, yet the population continued growing at 8 to 12% annually, exceeding natural growth rates in stable European populations. The Adriatic environment proved ideal for Griffon vultures, perhaps even better than their ancestral habitats. International recognition followed. In 2015, the Croatian Griffon Vulture project received the European Natura 2000 Award for Best Conservation Practice. In 2018, BirdLife International designated Croatia's Adriatic Islands as a critical site for Griffon vulture conservation. The project became a case study taught in conservation biology programs worldwide. More importantly, Croatia's success inspired direct action elsewhere. Between 2005 and 2020, at least 15 countries launched Griffon Vulture reintroduction or supplementation programs, many explicitly modeling Croatian methods. Bulgaria reintroduced 63 birds starting in 2010. Romania released 45 birds beginning in 2014. Even Cyprus, where vultures vanished in the 1950s, initiated reintroduction planning using Croatian expertise. The cultural transformation in Croatia was equally profound. Once persecuted as pests, Griffon vultures became national conservation icons. Croatian stamps feature vulture imagery. Environmental education programs teach schoolchildren about ecosystem services vultures provide. The bird even appears in tourism campaigns promoting Croatia's ecological diversity. Farmers, once hostile, became conservation allies. The guaranteed market for livestock carcasses created economic incentives for cooperation. Several farming families now actively monitor vulture nesting sites, reporting suspicious activities and maintaining feeding stations. This community engagement proved more effective than any regulation in protecting the birds. The project also revolutionized approaches to supplementary feeding. Early conservation efforts worried that artificial feeding would prevent birds from developing natural foraging skills. Croatia demonstrated that strategic feeding stations could support population establishment without creating dependency. As vulture numbers grew, usage of feeding stations declined, with birds increasingly finding wild food sources. By 2020, feeding stations accounted for only 30% of the population's diet, down from 90% in 2000. Research continues revealing fascinating vulture behaviors. Scientists discovered that Croatian griffons possess remarkable social learning abilities. Young birds follow experienced adults to carcasses across vast distances, learning optimal foraging routes and recognizing reliable food sources. This cultural transmission of knowledge accelerates population establishment in new territories. Breeding success rates improved dramatically over time. Early pairs averaged 0.4 chicks per nest annually due to inexperience and poor site selection. By 2020, established pairs averaged 0.9 chicks per nest, approaching theoretical maximum productivity. Improved nest site selection, optimal foraging efficiency, and reduced human disturbance all contributed to this remarkable improvement. The population structure also matured healthily. In 2000, nearly all birds were young releases. By 2020, the population exhibited natural age distribution, with approximately 30% juveniles, 20% subadults, and 50% mature breeders, a stable demographic structure indicating long-term viability. Several birds have been documented living over 20 years, approaching the species' 40-year maximum lifespan. Satellite tracking revealed extraordinary individual stories. One female, tagged as a juvenile in 1999, has nested successfully on Cres for 17 consecutive years, producing 14 fledged chicks. Another male, tracked since 2005, holds the distance record, flying from Cres to southern Italy, then to Tunisia before returning, a round trip exceeding 2,500 kilometers over 11 days. These birds aren't just surviving, they're thriving and exploring. The conservation team documented unexpected ecological relationships. Griffon vultures and golden eagles, which also nest on Adriatic cliffs, initially appeared to compete for nesting sites. Long-term observations revealed complex coexistence. Eagles hunt live prey, while vultures scavenge dead animals, minimizing dietary overlap. The two species now nest on adjacent cliffs without conflict, suggesting niche partitioning evolved rapidly. Climate change presents emerging challenges. Rising temperatures affect thermal air current patterns that vultures depend on for energy-efficient soaring. Changing precipitation alters vegetation and livestock mortality patterns, potentially impacting food availability. However, vultures' demonstrated adaptability suggests resilience. The birds have already adjusted breeding schedules by approximately 8 days earlier compared to 2000, tracking earlier spring onset. The economic analysis of the project reveals impressive returns. Total investment through 2022, including initial releases, monitoring, feeding stations, and education, approximated $4.5 million. Tourism and ecosystem service benefits exceed $20 million, yielding a cost-benefit ratio above 4:1. Beyond monetary value, the restored vulture population provides immeasurable ecological services. Disease control, nutrient cycling, and ecosystem stability worth far more than financial calculations can capture. Looking forward, conservationists project continued population growth. Suitable cliff habitat exists for an estimated 150-200 breeding pairs across Croatia's Adriatic islands, suggesting the current 87 pairs could nearly double. Expansion into mainland coastal mountains appears likely as the population saturates island territories. Several mainland cliff systems show suitable characteristics and lie within current foraging ranges. The project demonstrates that large-scale ecosystem restoration is achievable even in densely populated, tourism-dependent regions. Croatia balanced conservation with economic development, proving these goals aren't mutually exclusive. The Griffon vultures soaring above turquoise Adriatic waters symbolize successful coexistence between humans and nature. The legacy extends beyond Croatia. The project influenced international conservation policy, contributing to strengthened protections for migratory raptors under agreements like the Convention on Migratory Species. Croatian scientists now advise vulture conservation programs from India to South Africa, sharing hard-won expertise globally. For the vultures themselves, the transformation is complete. Birds that never knew Croatian skies now nest, breed, and raise chicks on the same cliffs their ancestors occupied for millennia. They've reclaimed their place in the Mediterranean ecosystem, soaring on 2.8-meter wings above islands that once seemed forever empty. This isn't just a conservation success story, it's a testament to what becomes possible when scientists, communities, and governments commit to restoring what was lost. Croatia took 100 birds and created a population of over 400. They transformed barren skies into soaring highways. They proved that extinction doesn't have to be forever. The Griffon vultures circling above Croatia's Adriatic islands remind us that even the most damaged ecosystems can recover when we give nature the tools it needs. Sometimes, all it takes is bringing back the missing pieces and the patience to watch nature do what it does best: heal, adapt, and thrive. What do you think about Croatia's vulture restoration project? Could similar approaches work for endangered species in your region? Share your thoughts in the comments below.